Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, what a load of absolute greenwash from Nick Smith there. I can remember in my very first week in this Parliament, my normally extremely cheerful colleague, the Honourable David Parker, leaving the chamber one night after we had been here in urgency, dealing with a National Party that didn't want the 90% target for renewables, that was going to mine national parks, that had got rid of the thermal energy generation ban that we'd put in place. All of the things that... And was excluding agriculture from the ETS, all of the things that David Parker had built up to put New Zealand in a position to stand up proudly on the world stage on climate change, and it was dismissed by this government. And the pathetic, pitiful targets that Chris Bishop is so proud of when it comes to what National's planning on climate change are an embarrassment on the world stage. This government clearly is in trouble in the polls. They've done the polling and they've said, whatever you do, ministers, don't come to the House and talk about housing. Don't talk about housing. If you're the Minister of Building and Housing and you've got a slot in the general debate, don't mention housing. No, you don't want to bring your baggage. You don't want to bring your housing baggage to the House. And so Nick Smith stands up to give us a lecture on climate change. Well, on this side of the House, Mr Speaker, we won't take those lectures from this government until we see real action, until we see an ETS operating properly, until we see New Zealand actually standing up proud on the world stage. Mr Speaker, I want to devote most of my time today to talking about the importance in New Zealand of the idea of every New Zealander having a share in prosperity. As Andrew Little said at the start of his speech today, New Zealand is a great country, a beautiful country blessed with fantastic natural resources, great people and fantastic opportunities. The reality of New Zealand today is that not every New Zealander and not every New Zealand child is getting a share in that prosperity, a fair go. The idea that most of us had in our families, that our parents had a desire for us to achieve more than they did. I grew up in a family where neither of my parents finished high school, but they wanted their children to go on and go to university, to be upwardly mobile, to be moving forward in the world, to be building a better life than what they had. And what we are at risk, Mr Speaker, at the moment in New Zealand is that a whole cohort of New Zealanders are being shut out of that idea that they've got a share in prosperity. And Mr Speaker, it's exactly that approach that's driven all of the social dislocation in Europe and what we see lying behind the Trump phenomenon in America. The idea that people don't have a place in the economy, that there isn't a place for them to achieve their goals, to get that social mobility, to build up their future for their family that comes. And that's what we see from this government. And so when we look today at things like statistics on wages, Mr Speaker, if working New Zealanders are getting less of a share in the prosperity of New Zealand year on year from this government, then we build up that gap in our society. And Bill English finally comes to the House today, Mr Speaker, and says, actually, I admit it, Statistics New Zealand were right. Income inequality, asset and income inequality in New Zealand has grown. The top 10% of New Zealanders hold 60% of the wealth. They hold 60% of the wealth because we have got a government with no idea on how to give New Zealanders a chance to get that social mobility, to buy their own home. And we have a government that does not care that we have the lowest wage growth in 6 years this year. That for 44% of New Zealanders, they didn't get a pay rise at all. It's all very well for those at the top to get it. Chief executives got their 12% pay rise in the last year. The average across the economy was about 2%. Two-thirds of New Zealanders got less than 2% in terms of wage rise. They are not getting their fair share of prosperity under this government. And this government refuses to acknowledge the reasons that lie behind that. Even though there is now a chorus of people telling the government that growth in our economy has been driven by increasing population. It's not been driven by the actions of the government to create more productivity. It's been driven by the fact that more people have shown up. Per person, it's flat. It's not going anywhere. And there is no stability in an economy that is built on immigration, speculation and debt. We need a government that will support our regions, invest in our education and training sector, build our economy up so that we grow wealth from the ground up, not rely on the failed trickle-down policies of this government that exclude people from our economy instead of saying every New Zealander deserves a share of prosperity.
Mr. Speaker.